All right, Global is dead. We're chilling in a dead spot at the moment, so I'm going to do a bit of a tier list week. I'm going to start off with the Dokkanfest TURs. As you can see down the bottom here, I just wanted to kick off by basically putting a little bit of a tier down the bottom here for the units that I don't own. Obviously, I don't really want to rate them because I don't think it's fair to, given that I don't have too much experience using them. I've tinkered with them on private servers, but I still don't think that's quite enough for me to be comfortable ranking them in a certain spot. I might throw them on a tier later just to kind of give my general thoughts, maybe, see how I feel. But without further ado, I'm going to breeze through these lower tiers, and then I'll go through a bit more detail with some of the higher tiers and justifying some of my placements above. So above them is a tier I call fodder. Basically, units you don't want to run unless you genuinely have no other spots on the team. These units are flat out being hidden for the most part. So even if you're floating them around, if they take a hit or two, they're probably going to lose you the run. It's as simple as that. Unfortunately, a lot of these units are basically just waiting for their easy A's. Above that is the filler tier. Now these units can do a little bit of a job if you need them to. You have Raditz and the Resurrection of F Blues is probably the most modern units here. Obviously only 200% leaders amongst them. But even as leaders, they're not going to cut it unless you've got a stacked team that is allowed to kind of work in front of them and hide them themselves. Kale and Khalifa kind of take too long to fuse. Otherwise, they're not half bad. Videl has her uses, especially with the dodge. Again, though, worst case scenario, you want to throw her on a team. The GT duo, a little bit of utility with their orb changing. Decent links in the GT kind of teams as well. But again, the running theme of this tier here is, I mean, don't throw them on the team unless you have to, though there are ways that they can survive on their own to a certain extent. The counter from Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta, plus he's effective versus all types, makes him a little bit formidable, again on a GT-centric team, but that team is kind of getting to a point where it has other options that are always going to supersede these units. Golden Frieza, or the Angel Final Form Frieza, stacking defense doesn't quite make him as usable as he might have otherwise been, and there's not enough events that the debuffing that he provides helps as well. A little bit of a dodge, but he has to take a hit first, so again, probably could go in the tier below, but there's something about him that just made me want to separate him from the ones below. And the Tech Super Saiyan 2 Vegeta, who transforms into Margin Vegeta, a little bit of a use, but again, you typically want to replace him if you can on the team. So in the tier above that is what I call the fringe tier. Units that you can kind of half build a team around. You know, if you've got a higher tier unit that needs a good partner and they fulfill the role, they might be the option that you might want to run, though there are probably other options better than them still. Bardock, something about him just doesn't sit right. He just takes too long to build up, and for a unit that came out so recently, and the way that the game is at the time of the release, I just not a huge fan. But again, can put in work. That Scouter is awfully useful, as is the Rainbow Orb changing. The Goku and Gohan exchange unit and the Margin Vegeta are the other 200% leaders outside of Bardock and the Limb Breakers. The damage reduction from Margin Vegeta can help him put in a little bit of work. His team is not quite good enough to make the cut in terms of the ones he leads, but with Over in a Flash and Royal Lineage, he can kind of he can make do, especially if you've got a Trunks on the team, and with units like the new LR Trunks and Vegeta, he can play a little bit of a role. The Limit Breakers on a Dragon Ball Hero centric team as well. Looking at Goku there, I could probably move him down, but it felt odd to separate them. I think Vegeta is the better of the two, given the way their designs differentiate despite them being kind of mirrors of each other. The Super Saiyan 2/3 Goku and the Kid Buu from the New Year's a couple years ago now, yeah, they're alright. I mean, Goku, you're probably relying on that full dodge build and a floating roll, though with the damage that he can output, he can kind of come in clutch to save himself, whereas Kid Buu has big bad bosses, has plenty of healing if he gets touched. He's got the active skill that beefs him up. He builds up a bit, so he gets to a point where he's relatively solid. A little bit of a fan of that unit. Apologies if you hear the birds in the background, they're having a time of their lives. And Broly here is a stacking unit with multiple additionals built in, though they're kind of, or at least one of them is conditional to being a pure or hybrid Saiyan's enemy. very few endgame bosses have that, though I see his value there, especially with some of the units that are coming out in recent times. Could be argued for the tier below, but I'll leave that for you to decide personally. The tier above is what I call conditional, basically units that, look, if you did have the right kind of team build, they can do a decent job. Not in every event, a lot, especially the area of effect kind of events, the ones that kick off really strong, like Merge Zamasu is a difficult event to kind of make do. But I think the 17s go relatively okay. They can be hidden, especially with the dodge built in. Obviously, again, area of effects are probably going to be their weak point. But if they're allowed to float, or even allowed to stack up in slot 2 and then get their fusion off as soon as possible, then they can really put in a little bit of an effort. Especially in some of the, we don't have too many superclass kind of enemies in endgame content, but that 8th anniversary event has several stages that I think are difficult enough to have a good enough playground to have some fun in. AGL Cell, relying on multiple enemies early, but if you can hide him a little bit in the early phases whilst he's becoming perfect, once he becomes perfect, he can be pretty solid. And with a partner like the LR Easy A Cell, who likewise is a bit of a conditional kind of unit himself, I think together they can do a decent enough job. But again, this is the conditional tier. It's certainly not the top tier. I think these are just a little bit better than the ones below them. Ginyu as well, as I mentioned, kind of with Broly, a stacker with additionals built in. But I think he's very deserving of being the tier above Broly, especially with a transformation that, once he's solid enough, also builds up a bit of dodge and stacks attack. He's got a bit going on. Pycon, weak as anything, but with a little bit of dodge, a little bit of support, and the active skill that's basically a ghost usher. In the right scenario, if he's placed in the right position on the team to appear when he needs to, can certainly actually make a huge difference as to whether you get a winning run or not. But on the flip side, if those conditions don't kind of fall in his favor, he can certainly lose you the run as well. Again, that's probably maybe him and Gohan, who I'm about to talk about, are probably maybe a controversial pick being so high. They could very easily be on someone else's tier list a lot lower. I wouldn't argue with that either. I've just found that, in the right scenario, they put in a job that I value, I guess. Gohan's active skill, similar to Pycon's, whilst not a Ghost Usher, as valuable as a Ghost Usher, supports everyone, with a multiplicative buff of defense, guards himself, stacks defense. I think he's got a role if he needs to be used. So that's the conditional tier. Above that is, now we're getting into the kind of pointy end of things. This is the solid tier. Units that, honestly, you can put on a team and not worry about too much. They certainly... They have shortcomings, which stops them from being in any of the two tiers above them. But for the most part, I think they do mostly good work. Super Saiyan 3 Rosé. By the way, these tiers are not ordered. I've kind of tried to put them in release order as much as possible, though I have probably made mistakes in that regard. Though the units on the left are not higher in value than the units on the right in any stretch. I'm just kind of, it's tiers, it's not ordered. Super Saiyan 3 Rosé, with his chance to guard, is not the worst thing in the world, especially if you want to design a team that fits the mold to make that happen. He can certainly put in work when he's allowed to transform and go, and once he does transform, he goes very hard. His shortcoming at the moment is probably the fact that there isn't really too much content that allows him to put in a good effort when the transformation is out, because things usually end too quickly. Turles needs to build up as well, stacks attack and all the rest. I think he's pretty good. Again, though, suffers from having content not necessarily tailored to his design, though I still think he's solid enough to make most teams, especially the ones he's on. The androids, an older unit. Actually, the following three units are relatively old. I mean, they're not from the 200% meta, but I still think that they really justify being relatively high in tier, especially when you do consider their age. That the orb changing for the androids, obviously they want it themselves, but it can also come in handy for a lot of units around them. Another Ghost Usher active skill similar to Pycon's. The nullification, which is actually relatively easy to see these days. A lot of Ki Blast supers come around in some of the harder content. I think the tech androids really can put in a good job, and it's not hard to make them look good either. Tech Janemba, Unfortunately, I'd love to see someone like that Rainbow Orb change. Unfortunately, he only gets that when he's transformed, which you never really want to do anyway. But he guards, he can have damage reduction, he can support. I mean, the supporting damage reduction is conditional, but once you get it, plus the building of defense on super attack for the turn, he really, really can be a clutch unit. He can even fulfill that slot 1 unit if your team is a little bit lacking in that regard. Similar to Tech Gohan, whilst it doesn't have the utility of someone like Tech Janemba or the Tech Androids, actually, funnily enough, they're all Tech, I just realized. He greatly stacks defense. You should be building him with additional anyway. So, chances are you're getting 2 greatly stacks per turn. It really doesn't take him long to get to a point where he's quite solid. His links are a little bit iffy, as are his partners, though I've had actually quite a little bit of success running him with the Kid Gohan here. If things work out the right way, that little bit of extra support from Kid Gohan to Tech Gohan here means that the guard goes that little bit extra distance into giving him that extra value. He's a little bit more solid from the start of the fight. It doesn't take him long to stack to a point where he's very, very good though. Now, the high tier. Not the highest tier there is, but these units are really difficult to leave off teams. Android 21, really good unit. And from my testing, I mean, I only have her at 55%. From my testing, I'm almost tempted to suggest that she's better untransformed, though that's because she's got a bit of dodge going on to help her out. A lot of healing going on when she does transform. Maybe delaying the transformation is a better way to suggest using her, at least to the point where she gets that action break. She's got another turn in her. It's a shame she doesn't stack in base. That would have been a really good kind of extra little bit of oomph to make her a little bit higher. I think if she did stack defense or even attack, I'd consider putting her in the highest tier. But as it stands, a little bit of key support as well makes her a really, really solid unit. And I guess maybe one of her shortcomings is that she's a super class unit with big bad bosses. If we get too many units on her team that require extreme class allies that have big bad bosses, she could be a little bit of a trick to use as a leader. But as it stands, I think she's really, really good. Kid Goku is one of the more recent MVPs in my opinion. He supports the Rainbow Orb changes. He is probably one of the ultimate floating units if you can run him on a team. I really do think that. Again, maybe a shame he doesn't stack in some way, shape or form, even if it was a 4-turn stack so that he had it kind of a little bit under his belt when he was floating. That would have been a little bit nice, but I can't kind of rave about him enough, though I just don't think he has that X factor that allows him to be in the tier above. That's kind of the common consensus with a lot of these, even though there's maybe a couple of controversial picks towards the end of it. Kale, haven't used her an awful lot. I've only just picked her and Yamcha up with coins, though again, upon using them, I think there's a little bit of a restriction behind them or a little bit of an X factor they're missing just to be in that top tier. But still incredibly good units themselves. Lead very, very good teams as well, which is a huge bonus and a big reason why they're relatively high in the tier list. I do value leader skills quite a bit. And then behind them, well, not behind them, but next to them in the tier is the 2 Gammas. Again, huge argument can be made for them being in the top tier, and I wouldn't argue with anyone who was inclined to put them there. I just don't have as much of a heightened opinion of them to put them in that tier. That being said, I was using Gamma 1 at 55% for a long time without owning Gamma 2, and I've only recently got several pars in the both of them, so my opinion is a little bit outdated, and that's maybe why I've moved them down a little bit. So I could run a team with them this afternoon and probably change my mind and put them above. So without further ado, we'll get into the highest tier, the top tier. I've simply called it the top tier, and it's these 4. I mean, if you watched the Dokkan Awards of 2023 that I hosted a couple of months ago, or over Christmas, you'll notice that these 4 units basically took out first to fourth in an absolute landslide of a vote. We had over 4,500 votes, and these guys, between the 4th place, which happened to be Limit Breaker Vegito, between him and 5th, it was just, you may as well not have even voted for 5th place. Like, that's how much of a gap there was. And all of these units just, they've almost never let me down, and when they do, it's because certain things just through RNG haven't worked my way. Sometimes God Goku's Rainbow Orb changing doesn't quite work the right way, or maybe I need to put him in slot 3 to help out other units in slot 1 or 2 and he misses out on 6 orbs. His dodge almost never fails me unless the guard's not active, funnily enough. It's just one of those things. Piccolo Jr. is a unit that I could understand why people may want to move him down a tier simply for the fact that extreme units are so lacking that he doesn't have too many partners or teams to actually run in. But the fact that he's actually such a good linking partner with someone like Goku here is a reason why I don't think that mindset is as prevalent on someone like Piccolo Jr. as it would be on someone like TURs or Super Saiyan 3 Rose or Janemba or the androids or anything like that. He can perform in a superclass centric team. He doesn't need extreme class allies. It's a shame that he wouldn't have big bad bosses in that sense, but throw him on a team with bad bosses and he absolutely tears things to bits. World Tournament Goku, I cannot rave it about enough. I can come unstuck every now and then if you get to his second or third appearance and there's no revive going off and his guard fails you, but that's kind of if, and I don't really see that come about too much. Limit Breaker Vegito also is somewhat conditional in terms of how good he can truly be, but in terms of building a team around him, it's easy. He has one of the best Easy A partners who links with him 6 out of 7 links. It's just crazy, and he's on Super Saiyan 4 LR Goku's team, the full power one that came out for Tanabata. Just there's so much good about that unit. All 4 of these units are just. There was certainly a memo that went out last year in terms of how to design TURs for those that design them, and basically said if they're in a major celebration, make them bonkers. If they're not, dial them back a bit, and I think that's what we saw during 2023. Though in 2022 we did see a lot of good. Those gammas there are hard not to rave about, and very easily could have been in a tier above. Kid Goku as well, I'm inclined to maybe change my mind at some point in the near future, but as it stands, this is what I settled on. In the very highest tier, the top tier TURs in my opinion, are Limit Breaker Vegito, World Tournament Goku, Piccolo Jr. and God Goku. Below them is as you see there. Now I'm very curious to know whether you agree with any of these placements, who you would move up, who's probably the farthest out of the tier that you would place them in. So, is anyone more than 1 tier away from your positioning? I'd love to know in the comments below. Again, this is subjective. I'm not asking everyone to agree with me. I'm not even suggesting anyone should agree with me. This is just from my experience. And I mean, as I said, I don't own all the units. So I've had a little bit of a play with these units down the bottom here. I pretty confidently would put the New Year's dual Dokkanfest and Super Saiyan 3 Goku and Hirudegan in the top tier. Hirudegan may fall down a little bit simply because of that kind of mindset that I was talking about with Piccolo, where as good as he is, he just doesn't have the team and teammates to make him as good as he truly wants to be, and his leader skill doesn't quite make up for that either. But hey, I mean, it's hard to say, and I'm not sure where I'd fall on it. Kid Gohan and Piccolo, I actually haven't used at all, so I'm not even willing to put them anywhere. But from kind of reading their kits, which is very difficult to place, I think I'd probably put them there. If not, maybe even up here. They're probably in between one of the two. I'd have to really test them out. The androids on paper, I'm not too jazzed on, so I'm probably going to put them there tentatively, and Trunks is probably going to end up down here if I had to put them somewhere. But ultimately, this is my placings if I'm only ranking the units that I've used. This is my tier list. Let me know what you reckon, guys, in the comments down below, or shout at me on Twitter. I'll probably have it posted over there as well. Instagram, you can find me. What else have I got? Discord, all the links are below. If you want to support me, you can do so. There's monthly subscriptions if you want to help keep the lights on as well. If you can't, don't worry about it. It's never required. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye now.